It's the OVGA podcast.
Welcome to episode 4 of the OVGA podcast. I'm Sanford. I'm here today with Dan and Ibrahim. We run the Facebook group Original Video Game Artwork Collectors, as well as the website originalvideogameart.com. Today we'll be doing a themed episode focusing on the work of Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell. Do you have a favorite Boris or Julie piece? Tell us in the comments. Now, to start today's episode, we'll be each doing a bit of a collection spotlight, one from Dan and one from Ibrahim. So I'll turn it over to them to show off some pieces in their collection.
Well, just one piece for me. It's already there. It's my Super Valus by Julie Bell, and I have Dan to thank for that. It was one of when I started collecting. I made a list of I think 10 pieces that I really wanted, and this was probably number one for me. And I'm not just saying that. This was, the first one on my list. And that's because I loved fantasy art, something like a Frazetta or a Boris or a Julie, just not video game related. But when I was looking at video game box art, and this piece, it stood out for me because it's not like a video game piece. It's really a fantasy piece, and it took number one. So when Dan put it up for sale, I'm like, Dan, I need this. Let's make it work. And yeah, luckily he agreed to to make the deal with me, and now it's with me. I'll bring it out.
Bring it closer. It's a nice size.
Yeah, sorry, the mic is in the way.
It is not every day that you get to enjoy a painting of a robot riding a fire-breathing tiger fighting a hot girl. Like, wow.
Yeah, that's
there's a lot. There's a lot there.
Yeah,
there's a lot there.
It's got so much going for it, as in like let me put this back. Julie did like a whole series of metallic paintings for like a calendar, and I think she did 20 of those. So to have that, and to have the tiger, and Julie's really well known now for like drawing wolves, tigers, horses, and then just a beautiful fantasy. So it's like a 3-in-1 for me. So that's why it was number one on my list, and my probably all-time favorite Super Nintendo cover.
I'm glad you love it, and I feel like it's in the right home, Ibrahim. And like with their work in general, I don't know if it's just me, but I really like the ones that they do that have the warm backgrounds like that, like the yellows and the reds. I think that works really well for whatever reason. Like that. On the non-game side, there's that flight piece by Boris with the dragons, and I think the girls are riding the dragons' backs, and their necks are all kind of pointed in one direction, and they're breathing fire all to the same point in the horizon. Yeah, and it's got those beautiful, reds and yellows and greens for contrast. So I love that one. On the non-game side, I think that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, as I went through the catalog for Boris and Julie, a couple of years ago, just kind of learning their work and stuff, the Super Valus 4 always stood out because of the motion in the tiger. Like, I thought that was captured pretty well, of the tiger giving life to the painting and jumping toward our heroine here. And so no, I'm glad it landed with you, Ibrahim.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that sort of, you look at so many of their pieces, and because they, when they're doing the composition, they do take it off still, so that they're taking photographs. So looking at her, there is a bit of motion to it, where some of the other pieces sort of it's a bit more still. But it was really nice to see the tiger and also the warrior. There's a bit of movement, and no, that just sealed the deal, and very happy with that.
Yeah, and even on the like the warrior female, like you said she's sort of still, but her weight is really on the back foot,
Yeah.
which I mean, if I had like a 600-pound tiger breathing fire at me, my
Yeah.
weight would be on the back foot. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
not getting anywhere near that thing. So at least like even though she's still like kind of, it has a lifelike balance to it, if
Yeah,
that makes any sense.
she's just getting that extra, little space before she just goes in, but
Yes,
I don't see her
yes.
surviving.
Yeah.
She's in tough. She's in tough. Those are
Yeah.
some big claws and some big teeth. The tiger reminds me just a little bit of, and maybe it's just because of the subject matter and I'm just reaching. I could totally just be putting an association there that doesn't exist, but it reminds me a little bit of that classic J. Allen St. John Weird Tales pulp cover. If you know the one, it's got those pastel colors. It's got the beautiful tiger kind of coming up.
We'll
It's
bring it up on the screen.
1933, 1934, something like that. Yeah, we can maybe come back to that later. I don't think we have that picture ready, but hopefully some of the listeners will know what I'm talking about. It kind of has that same, and it's a beautiful piece. And that illustrator, I think we've talked about him before, was the teacher of Tom Dubois' teacher, which is always kind of a association that stuck out in my mind. But yeah, it's gorgeous, Ibrahim. I'm glad you enjoy it.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to take it off your hands.
So Dan, you got some with us to share?
I do.
Now, in full disclosure, I do not own a Boris. I do not own a Julie. So we'll turn it over to Dan, and then I think
so we've already been joking. We've already been joking around that Sanford's going to end up being the most negative out of the three of us because he's not as biased. But yeah, I have. I was asked to bring a Boris, so I've got a painting in the background, but I'm actually going to show Phantasy Star 4, which is kind of one of the well-known Sega Genesis RPGs. Hopefully everybody can kind of see that okay. And that's a Boris. It's 94. It's one of the well-regarded RPGs. It comes up on the lists of kind of best RPGs and best game, not right at the top, but up there. So, it's one that I was really happy to be able to purchase from them early on back in the day, back kind of 2003 or so, 2003, 2004, maybe. I bought, a number of kind of game related Boris and Julie's from them directly. And so that was kind of fun at the time because they had their website up and they just had like job numbers. So in fact, maybe I can show on the back of this. No, it's not on the back of this one. Maybe on the back of this one.
So they didn't have like, this is
No.
a Sega Genesis piece in the title?
No. They would have like, I don't know, Warriors Triumphant or something. You know what I mean? Like something that had nothing to do with the game title that just kind of expressed the scene in some way that made sense to them, but wouldn't necessarily make sense to anybody or wouldn't give anybody a clue as to the place of publication. And so I would go through and I would be like, oh, J133. Yeah, I think that might be Wolfenstein, like, and so it was, and I didn't know all of them at that point. So it was kind of fun going through and kind of figuring out, okay, this might be a game piece, that might be a game piece. And Julie was always, incredibly gracious to deal with. It was her that I'd be dealing with rather than Boris on the game art purchases, but she was always just lovely to deal with. Really nice person, and well deserving of their success, I'm sure. And I just want to, and we've talked a little bit about these two pieces, but if there's one comment I want to make about Boris in particular, it's that, like Sanford and I and Ibrahim were kind of going through prior to this podcast, like he starts illustrating, in New York in like 1964 without speaking English, which took some cojones to move from Peru to do that. But more to the point, we're already seeing published illustrations on like comic magazines from Skywald and Erie and stuff in like 1970. And just think about that for a second. It's 2023. The guy's been making incredible illustrations for 53 years. Like, let that sink in, you know? I mean, there's certainly an element of people that, you know, criticize the work and so on, and maybe there are reasons for that, and we'll probably touch on that during the podcast and whatever. Like, you can have a positive or a negative opinion, but there's no denying the fact that, like, Boris in particular, and Julie too now, you know, probably almost 35 years now herself, just had incredible staying power and been performing, you know, near the top of their industry for a long time. And that really says a lot, I think. You know, I mean, if you look back at, you know, comic artists or other illustrators or whatever that were still putting out quality material 53 years after they started, it's a short list.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny. I hadn't thought about it. I was in the prep. I was focusing so much on the timeline, right? Of, okay, he's doing some of the Skyworld stuff, 1970, Eerie Comics, 71. Wow, here's some more Marvel stuff. Comes 73, 74. And that's what I'm focused on. But when you zoom out, yeah, 50 years.
None of us were born yet. None of us were born yet. All three of us, we weren't even in diapers yet. We weren't even a twinkle in our dad's eyes yet. And you know, and he was already professionally illustrating wonderful pieces before we were even born.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think, like, he wasn't even gonna, you know, paint. You know, he was studying to be like a doctor in Peru, and then some of his colleagues are like, "Oh no, you're quite talented. You should try, you know, being an artist." And that's where the anatomy comes from when he's drawing. You know, it's because he did pre-med, and you know, he understands the human body and everything. Of course, everything is it's on hyper. It's on steroids. All his works, but that's where that comes from. But it's crazy, you know.
Well,
50 years.
The other bit,
doing
and Dan will probably jump over me here, but you know, for both Boris and Julie, I mean, they both have backgrounds as bodybuilders, and it's been pretty cool as I've learned more about some of these artists. Not just Boris and Julie, but a number of them were quite into the human body, right, and working out and being fit themselves. There seems to be an interesting correlation between their interest in the physique of their own bodies and then painting those kinds of works. But definitely, right, Boris meeting Julie kind of in a similar fashion of her being introduced to him as a model for one of his pieces, and him looking for bodybuilders among models, but keeping himself fit.
I think all of Boris's models. I think all of Boris's models were like, you know, people from his gym. You know, he'd be like, "Oh, are you interested in, you know, modeling for one of my paintings?" And everyone, they'd be like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah. You know, and it's funny when you look back at any of the female figures over the past 35 years in his paintings, especially if they're blonde, you know, they tend to have Julie's likeness. You know, so many of them are modeled on her. Like, you could really see it after a while. But yeah, you're right. They were both, you know, very into that. And I think that leads into one of the criticisms that I've, you know, heard in the past about, like, and I don't know if this is just kind of in the comic art collecting community or just in the sort of more hardcore collectors on the CGC forums, but there was this real sort of negative attitude towards, oh, you know, get out the baby oil, it's a Boris painting, you know, because of the physiques and the glistening muscles and all that. And you know, maybe there is some of that in that era that maybe isn't the sort of strongest era, which kind of coincides with the game era of their work. But at the end of the day, before and after, they're doing amazing work. I think it's probably a tumultuous time in their lives with, you know, Boris kind of breaking up with his first marriage and getting together with Julie. And I just think there's so much good in terms of the stuff they've put together that, you know, if there's a few pieces that are a little subpar, every artist has got that. Every artist has got that.
So actually on that, Ibrahim, do you want to open up the screen share here? Because I think we can go through both some of our favorite Boris and Julie game pieces, but then kind of alternate a little bit, just showing some of, as Dan's saying, right, this baby oil comment,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
probably really doesn't, as you look at his late 70s work, that's completely off the mark, right? You're not going to see that glistening physique, you're going to see muscular characters, but not the oiled up realism that came later. Like, yeah, this one,
This is
Savage
74.
Sword of Conan, 74, right? So this is the first cover, the first Savage Sword of Conan. And, you know, 74, he does a few through 75, I think. And now if we pull up, for example, there's two here that are fascinating. Like, pull up the Eerie Comics 34. This is from 1971. So this Eerie Comics 34 is, you know, as you kind of poke around for the story of the start of Boris's career, Dan says he arrives in New York 1964. He's doing commercial illustration, you know, painting refrigerators and other stuff that ends up in catalogs. And you know, he remembers this piece, this Eerie Comics 34, as the first one that he sold to Walter Publications. And I think that was a big deal for him because Frank Frazetta was also doing work for Walter. And so this is the first one that he's got first fantasy piece that he sells. You know, we'll see some other stuff from 70 and maybe those are fantasy or they're not, or this is just a bigger deal in his memory. But it's incredible. You look at this in 1971, and then just 3 years later, 1974, the Conan work. I mean, there's just so much development.
And this is 73.
Yeah, even between that 71 to 73, it's just this. He's really, really developing as an artist very quickly, and also building his own style too.
Just to clarify, I think that was Warren Publications.
Oh, not Walter. Yes, sorry,
just
Warren Publications.
For the listener. Yeah.
So it's funny. I think through this, I kind of realized that, you know, my exposure to most artwork was through video games, right? So when I was, you know, 2017, buying a first piece of original art, then kind of like you, Ibrahim, I made this top 10 list. And so my focus went to like, what looks painted, right? There's absolutely incredible Disney artwork, meticulous detail that I just didn't even consider. I was like, oh, like that's a cartoon. That's not what I'm focusing on. I want original artwork paintings. And then you realize, holy shit, those were painted too, right? And that's a separate kind of realization. But I was going for these ones that we'll call painterly, right? You see the brush strokes, you know, that's painting or that's fantasy. There's some cool characters on there. And all the Boris stuff like rose to the top of my list. Just the cool factor, right? So the first one that probably caught my eye, I mean, Golden Axe 2 is really well known among his pieces. But the one that like really, we can zoom in a little bit. I mean, this one just caught my eye for the cool factor, and just it was as you think about getting introduced to art, you can clearly see someone painted this, and it's well painted, well rendered. But actually, it was Onslaught. Was probably like among his game work. As I went through each of the Genesis boxes, I thought Onslaught, which now Jeremy has in his collection, just had such cool. Like it wasn't, you know, it's not the same level of a piece as Golden Axe 2, but just I thought that the bad guy in the background was just so menacing. The warm colors that Dan was kind of getting at, the scene here, like, you know, this as for me learning about art for the first time, this is what really wowed me among his video game catalog. I think, you know, since then as I kind of get to like naming what a favorite Boris video game piece would be for me, this is up there, but I think you just visually alone, right? Not talking the series, the nostalgias, visually, you know, what do I like? I probably end up going with any of the Echo the Dolphin pieces. The first one is probably, So for me, and it was a weird way to land there, right? Because he's known for where there's humans, there's warriors, there's barbarians. Like that's what he's known for. And but the little voice in my head of they look posed, they look still. Like I thought Onslaught had a little bit less of that, but then you look at, the ankle is lifting up, the tilting of the body, the pointing, the gesturing. And so I kind of landed as like, what do I like? I thought he did 3 Echo pieces. The first is the most iconic. The third one from PlayStation and Dreamcast, probably the best painted of them. But I just liked that it showed his detail, how amazing he could be in his technique without some of and what I have come to see as distractions of the posing. And I thought because there weren't human characters in these pieces, that it really just let his talent and ability to paint show themselves off. So I mean, that's where I kind of ended up leaning in a surprising way, that my favorite Boris pieces are the ones without the warriors and stuff, and for his game work only, right? Broader catalog, different story, but for the game work, I think, any of the Echo the Dolphins would be the top for me.
I mean, I can't fault you there. They are beautiful. But for me, I'll have to go right over here. Might and Magic. I don't know. I know. Like he takes the photographs, of like all these models, and then he sort of just plots them into the painting. But in this painting, it really works, because it's like, I look at this piece and straight away I just see the starting screen of a game where you have the different characters, like, and you could just select the different characters and just choose your hero and play the game. And then you've got, this dragon, the boss that you need to fight. So when I look at this, it's, I don't know why, but that's what I sort of feel. And this is for me, if I had to choose a video game piece for Boris, it would be this. And then also you have the background. It reminds me of Frazetta, like, that, I think it's not the one in the jungle with the moss over here. It's
Catwoman, I think it's called
Catwoman. Yeah, Catwoman. And you could, I mean, Boris has, said, Frazetta is one of his favorite artists, and he's someone he did look at, even for a little bit. But it's just gorgeous for me. This piece is just beautiful.
I think when you focus on the background like that, for me in this piece, this is what really takes him back closer to the work he was doing in the late 70s. And we can pull up some book covers in a little bit, but like the color palette and the way he's doing the branches and the other background details, there's a difference in color palette from his late 70s stuff. Like if you look at and
there's a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, there's just, I think probably he spent more time, I think, as you look at, like, what year is that Might and Magic 7? It's probably 2000?
99. Yeah, just about, yeah.
Like, I think he put a lot more time into that one than he was doing for his video game pieces, just 5, 6, 8 years earlier.
Yeah, no,
I mean, we've had that discussion, in that his 70s work is strong. Kind of in the early 90s is probably a low point, I think, overall, and then it really takes off again. So there's that few years that I think there are some pieces that maybe weren't as strong, but by 99 he's doing awesome work again, and for the next 20-25 years again. And while we're on the subject of the background, like, you've brought up this Tarzan calendar to kind of show what Sanford was getting at in terms of the background foliage and that. I think you can really see that on Run Saber too, which is a Julie, but as maybe we'll talk about, there's some discussion that they were probably working on each other's work to at least some degree during this period. If you bring up Run Saber, you really see that same kind of mossy treetop kind of vibe. Yeah. That's maybe not the best resolution, but
yeah.
I mean, I could run and get the original if we want a better look at it. But
but we can put up an image for people watching.
No, I think between Boris and Julie, where even though they have similarities in their style and Julie learning under him, I think actually Run Saber kind of shows that separation between them. So Julie here, and this is dated 93, so she meets Boris in 89. This is 4 years later, her first big piece. Ibrahim, can we pull up the metal magazine cover from 1990 with the shark? So this is her first big
the heavy
piece.
metal.
Heavy metal. That's what it is. This is her first big piece in 1990, and then Run Saber is 3 years later. For I think that's as talented as Julie was in such a short period. And Dan said, probably both working on some of the pieces together. That what she was painting in the background for Run Saber, and how Boris was after painting, from 64, getting up to doing professional work in 1970 to really some of his best stuff, 75, 76, 78, up through there. It's just that difference in years of experience, how finely rendered I think the backgrounds were. But maybe that's just an off the cuff, reaction to the piece.
Yeah, no, I love the chroming on this. I think this is what launched a commission of 20 pieces. It was this piece that got her to do the calendar, and then she did 20 illustrations for a calendar, all in that same sort of style with bits of metallic to it.
So Dan, if we put you on the spot, do you have a favorite Boris game piece?
Yeah, and I thought we were going to kind of overlap, but clearly we haven't. For me, it's probably Golden Axe 2. I just think that, it's got all the classic elements that you'd want in a nice Boris. It's got the Babe, the Beast, the Barbarian, so the 3 Bs. It's got the warm colors. All of the poses are nice. There's action. The dwarfs kind of stepping forward well, the barbarians at the ready, and it's a really lifelike pose, and you can see his gaze off into the distance. The Babe and the Beast are wonderful too. It's one that I look at, and there's nothing wrong with it from my perspective. There's nothing that's awkward. Everything's well rendered. Everything's posed well. It's a classic game. I don't know how you to me, it's the best of the bunch because you've got the classic image, all the classic elements, nothing out of place, and a great game on top of that. So
yeah.
For me, it's easy. I think that's easily the number one for me.
I think, definitely among his game pieces, right? Of which is the most iconic, nostalgic, visually appealing. I think that would be, if I'm thinking value wise, right? Golden Axe 2 would have to be what I put at the top for his work. And of course, I am a Sega Genesis guy, right? So even as I'm choosing between it, I'm mentioning Golden Axe 2 and Onslaught and the 2 Echo games and stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm trying not to. I was like, oh, let me. Is there other stuff I like? And I'm looking at can we pull up one that makes me kind of laugh? So he did.
And I'm a Nintendo guy, and I'm bringing up Run Saber, right? You're so right about that.
Can you pull up Dragon Wars? He did 1990. I think it was
more
NES,
Sega. More Sega.
No, that one's not Sega. That one's
NES.
Oh. No,
it's NES.
Dragon Wars.
Yeah,
Dragon Wars is not NES.
No, this is DOS. Then this is a computer title.
PC.
Okay,
sorry,
it's
PC.
Yeah.
But oh my, this is the one that kind of makes me laugh as you just look at. It's beautifully done, but the posing here, right? You got the Babe on one knee, kind of with the short sword over her thing. The other guy posing and turning, and the sword in one hand, the axe in the other, and it's extremely well done. But I can't help just look at those particular poses going into battle are they're just kind of silly for me. And I think to your point, Dan, you in Golden Axe 2, you don't get that, right? Here, you're like, it passes the eye test until you kind of say, well, hey, what's going on? Is this fight going to make sense? And this is kind of that, yeah.
Like we talked about with Super Val's 4 and that Babe kind of being back with her balance because, my lord, there's a 600-pound fire-breathing tiger right in her face. Here you've got this giant horned dragon a foot from you with its tongue almost licking your forehead, and you're kind of sitting there like, oh, it's another day at the office. Like, it is ridiculous, and to their detriment, I think, the fact that it's so well painted, because the technique's so good, because it's so realistic, it brings into focus how unrealistic the concept of the composition of the piece itself overall is. And so, I think that's where some of the criticisms sometimes have come into play, as pieces like this. And like I say, they're better before and they're better after, but there is this window where you get a few ridiculous looking pieces. You're right.
Yeah. Now, do we?
I'd still love to own it, but
yeah. No, and this one is on Comic Art Fans, right? The
I
owner
don't think
has
the
it
collector
in their collection.
Yeah, that's not going anywhere.
Now, maybe you've reached out, Ibrahim, right? But I've kind of
it's amongst, it's in the hands of a great collector, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But
no, it's fun for me.
Just going back to that, do you think because it's sort of in that video game era, like when he started doing a lot of video game covers, that he gets a pass because it's sort of like, I could just justify it as saying, oh, you know what, that's the two video game characters, and you're looking at this box art shopping, and you're looking at this, you're like, oh, these are two characters, there's a monster coming for them. So he doesn't need to sort of make it like real, he doesn't need to justify it just to say, oh, if he's like this, he's definitely gonna die. I think he was just given like, oh, draw two characters, monsters coming at them, and they just give, I just give it a pass.
No,
I don't like
bullshit.
to critique it. I don't know. I don't want to critique it too much.
Okay, if you're commissioning, let's take his, you hire an illustrator to sell product, right? Now, I think, would this image sell the product? Yeah, absolutely. It's still cool, right? It would sell the product. But his book covers from the late 70s, they're also to sell a product, right? And he's got enemies, right? And he's got the barbarians and the babes. He's got the same elements to it, but the posing and the scenes are just stronger, right? So I don't think it was, their video game character versus being a fantasy novel. Like one that I his Tarzan work, his Conan work is really well known. As I was kind of going through, is like, if I had an unconventional pick for like a Boris painting I really like, there's one called The Maker of Universes, and it's got like a winged harpy on it, if we can pull that one up.
Which one is that?
The Maker of Universes. It's probably at the bottom there, your second to last one.
There we go.
I don't know. I just thought this was I just like the color palette, the background, the winged harpy itself kind of has the sexualized stuff that Boris is putting in his work a little bit. But just I like
you're telling me you like the banana hammock.
I had actually not even noticed that, right? Because I'm so focused on the pose here for the character looks natural.
Yeah, right? It's a great pose.
He's guarding. He's got the knife.
Also,
like everything about that is like, if he's getting ready to. I don't think the character knows if he's going to fight this thing. But
that's exactly what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say, I honestly think, I don't know, maybe it's just the timing is right, and he was on a decline, if you want to even call it that. But I think he's done that like knowingly. Like, surely when he's painted this, and he's knowingly, like, he's just plotted them in. I don't know. I wouldn't like to think that this was a sort of misstep by him.
So the one, and like, I don't know if this is, I know my view on his career started with game work, then I expanded and saw more of his work. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, right? I think that for that was a 1990 piece, I think, that Dragon Wars one. I do
89.
think
Yeah.
that, with Dan's comment about the baby oil kind of commentary on the comic boards and stuff, I can't help but think his focus shifted from, I'm going to paint this scene and put it into the viewer's imagination. I think that's probably where he started in his 70s work, to, I am going to paint these characters as perfectly as possible and show off all the fine definition and detail and posing. And I think his focus as a painter and what he wanted to do, I can't help but I can't help but think that changed, right? So what he wanted to show in his painting was different in 1990 than it was in 78. Maybe that's wrong, because I know I have a very narrow view of his work.
And I maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right, but I kind of share that view. Like I feel like that sort of baby oil era got a little self-indulgent. Like it wasn't all necessarily about. And look, you know, um, I think he's an amazing artist. I don't mean for this to sound critical whatsoever, but I do feel like it got self-indulgent in a small window of time there.
All right. This is 2000, and looking at some of his 90s pieces, I'm like, okay, I'll give him a pass here, and but this, I just looked at this and I didn't see the date. Like, I saw this like a year ago because I actually saw it on Heritage, and I'm like, that's a great Boris piece. Is this an early piece? And then I looked at the date. I'm like, oh wow, that's 2000. So I mean, for and what caught my attention, the monster, the background, even the foreground, and he whipped this out in 2000, and bloody hell,
I think what
it's gorgeous.
I think that's a trend for all of his 2000 work, at least for his game pieces, right? When you look at Might and Magic 7, you look at this one here, I don't know the name of it. You look at Echo the Dolphin for the PlayStation and Dreamcast. He put so much work into the background.
Yeah.
Palettes are incredible, right? They take you in, like you really look at how many different I can't speak, the shading, the tones, the detail, the time spent, not just on the characters, but everything going on. I think in that 2000s period, he was putting a lot of time in it, every inch of the paintings, and it shows.
Yeah.
Since we talked about that Echo one, do you want to bring up the Echo PlayStation one? Because the use of maybe we don't even have it
I
here,
don't
do
have
we?
it.
Yeah, I think
No.
there's
That's
not
okay.
good
That's okay.
good pictures online, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, it's brilliant use of color to make it look like it's underwater. It's gorgeous. Yeah. So we've each kind of talked about a favorite one, and I feel like we kind of haven't done the same with Julie, but we're also running into a lot of like we've been going on for a while. Do
Yeah.
we really quickly want to mention a favorite Julie?
Yeah, sure. You want to start with you, Dan, and then Ibrahim, and I'll take last?
Yeah, okay. So for me, and I'm just kind of looking over the folder because I actually didn't prepare an answer, but there's a number of ones that kind of draw my eye. Like from a collecting standpoint, Wolfenstein 3D is a good one. Demon Crest is a good one. In terms of image, Super Valis, of course, Turrican, and in some ways maybe Axe Battler, because it is just a beautiful scene, and the pose is quite sort of it's a little still, like you were talking about, Sanford, but it's also realistic with the overhead menace and everything. And that's really nicely done. Just in general, everything about it.
Ibrahim?
I mean, my favorite before was the King of Dragons, and this is because this game was like one of my favorites. And but then I started looking deeper into this painting, and then I sort of noticed the I don't know, maybe Julie used like a female for these poses. That's just the vibe I got. So it quickly went away from this to going back to Super Valis. So that's sort of, where I am now. And um, nice little thing is that's actually Julie. Julie posed herself for that painting. But it used to be King of Dragons, but then my eye noticed a few things, and then I quickly went back to Super Valis. So I'm happy to say I own it. So that's good.
Yeah.
While we're giving Sanford a little bit of time to formulate, do you want to bring up the picture of Julie herself with the wolf and with the wolf paintings and the other paintings? Oh, do we not have those in the folder?
No, we don't.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind. Sanford, why don't you go for it?
So I think if I'm almost kind of like separating her work into different years and periods, right? Like I think among the stuff that's signed by Julie, that first one, Axe Battler, is, my favorite of those pieces. But if we touched on earlier of how much of an influence were Boris and Julie painting together at this period, just 2 years after they meet, 1 year after the heavy metal cover, is it all Julie's work, right? Some of those nagging questions in my head, but I think the pose, right, fits for the character fighting the flying thing coming in. It's just cool. I like it. But if I try to choose one that's like distinctly Julie, kind of two answers, right? I think, again, kind of like my Boris Echo choice, I think Demon's Crest, because it's not quite human, it just it works better for me. Something about that. I mean, there's still the pose kind of a thing, but because it's non-humanoid, I like it.
You keep
It
choosing
works.
ones with banana hammocks. What's up with that?
And you keep being the one to notice the banana hammocks.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, in fairness to me, that's the first Boris and Julie I ever purchased, and that was back in 2003, I think. It was one of the first game pieces I ever found, if not it was one of the first that, like, I bought 3 from Adam as my first purchase. That might have been my 4th, and so it was very early on. It's $2,500 at the time, which we'll come back to maybe in discussion of their market values and everything. But I love Ghosts and Goblins, and Demon's Crest is kind of an offshoot series from the Ghosts and Goblins franchise, and so this character is the same motherfucker that kills you a million times if you're trying to complete Ghosts and Goblins.
Yeah.
So, for me, like, I can picture this little red son of a bitch killing me like 4 million times as I'm trying to complete that game. So that kind of adds a special element to it for me as well. And it's quite a collectible game in its own right. Capcom, all that. So, that'd be one of my favorites to kind of as a collector as well, just because of the connection to a really favorite franchise.
The cool one that you shared in the Facebook group was actually for the Greg Winters painting, which is Demon's Quest 2. Is that what the NES series is called, right?
Yeah, that's a Firebrand as well.
It's his cartoon version that we assessed was Julie's direct reference, right? So you get the conical head and stuff like that of how Winters did it in the more cartoon style. That's Julie's reference to paint this, and then she makes it realistic. That kind of side by side is very cool. And then the other one for Julie, I kind of mentioned. We mentioned earlier Wolfenstein, and this is one where if you pull up the 2 pictures, I think this is where the box crop I like better than the painting.
Interesting.
Just you see the gun shooting off. That is kind of, why is the gun being fired after he's been hit and his fingers no longer on the trigger, kind of a thing. Right? That gets cropped out. The left leg that's kind of on the ground still holding him up, right? That posing, when you crop it, it just becomes such a strong image, and it was perfect for selling the box. I would, of course, love to own the painting, right? I would pass up the painting because I like the crop better or something. But I thought that side by side was pretty cool for that piece.
You're so right. It's a stronger image after it's been edited in this case.
Dan, you kind of mentioned on some of the market talk for these guys. I mean, yeah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. So why don't we start with Savage Sword of Conan 12 because that sold really, really recently, and that surprised some people, I think, because that went for $78,000. Do you want to bring up the picture, Ibrahim? It's a really lovely, lovely piece. It's one of those pieces where you look at it and you go, okay, the property it's connected to is strong. There's nothing you'd change about the painting. It's got the menacing kind of characters. It's got Conan. Number 12.
It's going to be it's called like SSOC 12 or something in the folder.
Yeah. So that sold for 78,000 at a recent Heritage auction, and I think that took a lot of. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, bring that up. Yeah. So, the babe's beautiful, the barbarians in the gorgeous kind of lifelike pose. You get the skeletons kind of creepily coming towards them, and then the hooded figure behind. I mean, there's a lot to love about it, and not much you would ever change about it.
No.
So, it's really on point. And I had this discussion with a fellow collector as to what this piece was going to do, and I thought it was going to do either 72 or 78. So I felt kind of vindicated that my guess was correct. But I think that surprised a lot of people because there really hadn't been a Boris at public sale, or a Julie for that matter at public sale, that had done more than 40 grand before that, and that was the St. Mark's Baths painting, which was like a literally an advertisement for a bathhouse, and that went for 40 grand.
Now he did use that bathhouse painting on like his Boris 2 book, I think. One of his own promotional books. I don't know if that helps at all, or if the bathhouse in its.
Yeah, I mean, my take on that is that a lot of his, like, he had several books that he self-published. Almost all of his early work would have been in there in one way or another. So, I don't know if it really helps one versus the other that much. But at that time, that 40 grand was kind of the high public sale. And before then, they had kind of stalled out at 25 grand and so on. But the 40 grand was relatively recent. And to me, it was like the Savage Sword 12 was a much, much, much better piece. And, when I looked at Savage Sword of Conan 10, that had sold for 25 grand, but that was like 10, 12, 15 years ago. Like, it was forever ago. So it was overdue to kind of bust through that ceiling and bust away through it. So I wasn't surprised. And I think out of the comic work that he did, it's Savage Sword 1 that would kind of go for the most money today. Like, I think that's easily, I don't know, what is that? 150, 200, 250 grand. If that comes to market today, I think that really crushes, just because, it's the number one. Comic collectors like that number one. It's got a strong image in its own right. It's the key issue. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if that did do like 250 if that came to market.
So what's interesting is, jumping on the timeline here. Sorry, I was looking in the background, but like, those there were a couple early sales, 2006, 2007, right around that $30,000 mark. There's that Tarzan cover.
Yes.
And then that bathhouse one doesn't come up until 2018, right? So if a full decade passes, and I think you got some really great Boris pieces that got auctioned now 15 years ago. And then you've got like over the next 10 years, just not as the same tier of paintings are coming up. There's things changing hands, but not your Conan pieces, not your Tarzan pieces. The bathhouse piece comes up in 2018, and then Savage Sword of Conan 12 earlier this year at 78,000.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on. Like, I think there was a stall out in what the pieces were getting for a period there, and I I wouldn't be surprised if that stall kind of led to people not wanting to consign their better pieces because they didn't think they were going to do as well. And I think that's flipped. And in the same way, back when I started, I mean, you could maybe get a lower end one for, two, 3 grand. And I think these days it kind of starts at 10 for anything.
Yeah,
even like the lesser pieces now are getting good money.
I think definitely anything published, right? There was a calendar piece. I mean, I guess it's still published. There was a calendar piece that sold for like less than $4,000 earlier this year, January 2023. And that surprised me, just kind of looking for data points and results. But oh my goodness, I'm just looking at the Tarzan piece that you still got pulled up, Ibrahim. I mean, like,
yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, if that
funny,
comes up today, that's big money, I think.
I think there's uses, like the usage plays a big role. You did say, oh, if anything is published, but then it's where was it published? Who does it resonate with? Which generation? This is a 70s piece, so you're talking the people that were kids back then. They've got disposable income more than a 30-year-old that is after a video game piece. So there's usage, and there's also the different timelines. So that plays a very big role into how well these pieces will do at auction.
I will say though,
go ahead.
I'd just say for me, like we said earlier, if I eventually buy a Boris piece, it's going to be it'll be probably a non-game Boris piece, right? Just because as I look at like what I'm attracted to, what I like, but like, so I have no tie to Conan, I have no tie to Tarzan, but those are just incredible pieces. Like I would take that Tarzan piece any day of the week over probably any video game piece easily. But I would take
really
the Tarzan
like
piece
over Golden Axe too.
I think so. I mean, like
really?
now, I just on image.
I think
right
I would.
Now, yeah. Like Golden Axe 2 is more more nostalgia, more staying power, I think. But I just love that Tarzan image. Like even like I guess like I can get to a point where I'm just looking at the image. So like that Savage Sword of Conan #1 from 73 or 4? 74? 73, right? And then you look at Savage Sword of Conan 12. I take the 12 over the 1 just on image. I don't know. It's just a better painting. But of course that's Conan #1, right? So that's going to have the higher value at market. But that 12 is just absolutely incredible. I mean, those two pieces, I can't remember what the other $30,000 sale was in that 2007 timeframe, but like there's a reason that the Tiger piece there, the Tarzan piece sold for 30,000 15 years ago, right? Like there's a reason it pulled that value when other stuff was 5,000-6,000, and that one was 5 times the value 15 years ago. It's just incredible.
Yeah,
now, I think on the go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like we've talked about the public sales, and rightly so, and I think we've seen the kind of minimum bar creep up, like you said, for anything published from maybe 3 before to kind of 10 now. And there was a long stagnation period, right? And then recently it's kind of bumped up a bit because they started getting too cheap. But there's some good private sales as well. And actually sort of let's call it a semi-public sale to start with. That Thanos, do you want to bring that up? One of the guys in the group owned that piece. I don't think it's any secret, but I'll leave the name for now. And that's sold on the Comic Click marketplace for, I want to say, 72,000.
Wow.
And this was maybe a year ago or something. And there was also a Wolverine piece. He is kind of naked in the woods and wearing his helmet, kind of the Weapon X kind of storyline. This is from the Marvel cards. So this is kind of just after they're done most of their game work and are kind of getting back into a little bit of comic property stuff via the comic cards. And so this is kind of in that mid 90s or maybe later 90s kind of time frame. And so there's a Wolverine as Weapon X, and that I think that went for 70 on the Comic Click exchange again. So those were two kind of strong pieces, or two strong sales as well, kind of leading up in that time frame. And then there was King of Dragons, that Super Nintendo cover that sold privately for a little chunk over six figures, which is a beautiful piece also and a wonderful game. So no surprise that sold for a great amount. So there's the pieces that have sold, and there's the pieces that could come to market. And it'll be interesting to see how they kind of continue to do. I think they'll do very strongly as pieces come. I think that era of some comic collectors in particular kind of looking down on them for the baby oil era and all that, I think that's over with. And I think we're back in a place where we can look at their career kind of more on a more with greater perspective. And at the end of the day, like we kind of said at the beginning, I mean, this is a guy killing it for 53 years for the most part, and that says a lot. So
coming into this end of our episode market conversation, I was unaware of those the Thanos and Wolverine sales above 70K. And so just a few minutes ago, Ibrahim had said, well, do different pieces resonate with different buyers? And for me, I say, hey, give me the Conan, give me the Tarzan. I have no connection to them. They're just incredible. But hearing, the 70K plus sales on the two Marvel pieces, right, I think really illuminates that, right? I think the buyer for the Marvel piece is completely different from who would be buying the Tarzan or the Conan piece. And I think the market for the game piece is going to be a little bit different too, right? You might have some overlap, but you're going to have someone who, has a nice and valuable video game collection who says, okay, I want to take it to the next level, right? I want to own a piece of original art, and I want a Boris, I want a Julie, right? And I think that almost starts to set its own little market. It's all just kind of fascinating, right?
100%. I think, and in many ways, I think that their market for their game work is kind of stronger than the overall market because, it's this limited subset of material. At the end of the day, even though they did a large number by kind of game art standards, it's still only 35 or 40 pieces or something.
Yeah, it's not a lot to go around.
It's not a lot. And if you want one, and any published anything starts at 10 grand now. And then now you want a game piece, which is a tiny subset of that. And then you probably want a good game piece because, you want to shell out your bucks on something that you're really going to love having. I mean, it's not hard to imagine how, when you kind of filter down that way, now instead of 40 pieces, you're talking about like 5 that you really like. You got to pay up.
Yeah, because out of those 5, it's not even available.
Yeah, I mean, I almost have, it's, regret's not quite it, right? But when I bought my first piece from you, Dan, in 2017, one of the ones you had available was Strider 2, Genesis piece by Julie Bell, and you had it at 4,500, and I chose the Galaxy Force 2 for 3,600 instead. Still love it, right? And I'm very happy with my choice. Very happy that I have a Winters piece in my collection, right? But as you say, there's way more Winters pieces than there are Boris and Julie pieces. And you kind of narrow down and you look at like what's available from their game work. I think I've kind of almost resigned myself, even as my collection grows, that I'm probably not going to have a Boris or Julie game piece at this point. I might get a Boris piece that's not game, but I think some of that is not me ruling myself out, but just, there's so few. I don't think some of them are going to come up. And as you watch the game market develop for these, that's fascinating because you're looking at the two that sold on Heritage, Onslaught and Golden Axe. And I think this is long enough ago that, maybe the results don't hold water now, but Onslaught and Golden Axe 2, they were both about 3,500 in 2007. And at the same time, right, the Tarzan piece, the same year or a year before, is selling for 10 times that. Now you fast forward, right? I think there is a much stronger market for the game pieces, right? As the value of games themselves have come up, the people that were buying those games now being in a position to have their own income and means, being between 35 and 50, 60, at this prime earning point in their careers and wanting to go back and buy something nostalgic, that even though the Golden Axe is selling the same as the Tarzan in 2007, fast forward now, I think they're going to be much closer in value if both pieces come back up to market.
Yeah. Was that Golden Axe 2 in 07? I remember that being like 03.
No, they
Something
were
like that.
07. Yeah. And I think
Both of them?
yeah.
Really?
Well, because you were saying
Onslaught was, I agree, but I thought the Golden Axe came up much.
No, because I think your first pieces from Adam were 07, right? Like I don't think you started.
No, you're right. You're right. I'm getting confused. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So, okay. And, one thing that, while we're talking about the ancient results on HA, there was also an ancient result for Super Vallis 4, Ibrahim, that's sitting behind you.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but that's no longer in the HA database. And I don't get it because, it was there for 10 years or more. You could look it up. It had gone for $1,500 or so back in the day. And I don't know why that's not there anymore. I don't get it because,
that's weird.
It's really weird because the record is permanent. Things don't change. Things don't move out of there unless, they have a sale like today and the item goes unpaid and then they'll remove it from their records. But if it's 6 months out from the auction and the data point shows there, it just shows forever. But for some reason, somehow, some way, Super Vallis 4 got removed from the database, but it was there at one time. It was called Julie Bell Fireballs, I think, was the name on HA, and it was 1,500 and change.
Going to that, actually, Dan, did they change their approach? Like when you started buying from them, you said that they just had random names, not video game related. Over the years, did they change that approach? Did they actually look at where these were published and update the titles as they saw people were target buying those pieces?
I guess I don't know because I bought everything of theirs that was game related that I identified. So I never let it get to that.
No, I have an answer. So I bought first piece in 2017. So it must have been 2017 or 2018 that I was looking on their website. They had Golden Axe 3 on their website at that time in 2018 for sale, available, called Silver Sword. So 2018, it was still being called Silver Sword. It was never called Golden Axe 3. The fact that it was related to Sega Golden Axe, not listed at all. And it was on sale for, I think, $8,000 in 2018.
$8,000. That's right. And look at how obviously Julie the female is. Look at how obviously Julie is. That is like Julie looking in the mirror,
And now this is the one I would say, if I had like regrets of passing up, even though it's unpublished, it became the base. A Japanese artist used this as a basis to paint the Mega Drive version in Japan. Like, I think knowing I could have bought a Boris Golden Axe piece at that time at 8,000 would have been a lot for me. But that's the one where like, now if I could say I have a Boris Golden Axe piece, like, that's the one I have regret. I think it's among the community, right? Another one of us did buy it, and it's in the Facebook group, and I don't know if they shared it or not, but so luckily I know where it is. I don't think it'll be available.
It's beautiful. It's one that I look at today too, and I say, I'd like to have it too. I mean, everything about it is wonderful, but like you said, $8,000 was a lot then, and just in terms of other opportunities and stuff too, as you're squirreling away artwork as best you can, and you're trying to do the most you can with your money. $8,000 for an unpublished cover at that time felt like a lot.
Yeah.
And so it was. I wasn't that tempted by it at the time. Now I look at it and I go, "Why didn't I spend the $8,000?" But at the time,
deal.
Yeah, I think I showed it to you. I said, Dan, have you seen this? How is this still here? And you were like, well, $8,000's a lot. And I was like, okay, yeah, I guess it is. But it's easy to look back, right? And you go, should I be selling something to make this happen? So look, we've gone, a little over an hour now. We probably should just about call it. we'll see if any final thoughts from you guys. But for anyone still listening, teed it off with a question at the beginning. Do you have a favorite Boris or Julie piece? Video game piece, non-video game? Leave it in the comments. Share it with us on the YouTube video. Certainly in our Facebook group. I'm sure we'll have continued discussion on this episode once we post it. But share with us. What do you like about their work? What do you not like? Dan, Ibrahim, final thoughts?
What's your favorite brand of baby oil? Bring it, we got to have a little fun with it, because at the end of the day, I know that there's a certain, like, there's some people that, when their name comes up, are going to bring up that comment. And so I'd rather be the one mentioning it and kind of discussing it in context of what a great career they've had than, than leaving that for somebody to mention later. At the end of the day, two wonderful artists.
Yeah, I think two great masters. I mean, to the extent when Sanford was writing their bio on OVGA, I came across a little thing about the paint that Boris and Julie use. They specifically choose certain colors, like certain palettes and certain paint that doesn't oxidize and fade easily. So if you have two different reds, Boris and Julie will go for the red that won't oxidize to that extent. And I never even thought about that. I never knew that was a thing. But I mean, they're just they are masters of fantasy art, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I think that all of their paintings will be quite stable, to your point, because just oil paint in general is a really stable medium. People are painting on that for hundreds of years, if not longer. So it's built to last.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. We'll see you guys for the next episode.
Bye, everybody. See you in episode 5.